After defeating King Thordan, Nidhogg crashes onto the arena, dealing massive raid-wide damage with Final Chorus. Like Thordan, Nidhogg's auto-attacks cleave, this time in a column pattern. We begin the phase with our main tank south and the rest of the party at southeast. We made this decision because Nidhogg spawns facing south, but feel free to turn him if your group pleases. Following 3 auto-attacks, Nidhogg will begin casting Dive from Grace. We'll walk through the mechanic as a whole, before going through each player's individual positioning. This cast will mark 3 players as 1s, 2 players as 2s, and 3 players as 3s. These number markers indicate what order players will be dived upon by Dragoons. At the end of the cast, each player will receive one further debuff, either a circle, indicating High Jump Target, a forward arrow, indicating Spineshatter Dive Target, or a backward arrow, indicating Elusive Jump Target. After being jumped on by our Dragoon, a tower will spawn. Circle towers spawn where the player was standing. Forward arrow towers spawn 10 yalms in the direction the player was facing at the time of the jump, and backward arrows spawn 10 yalms behind the direction the player was facing at the time of the jump. Any number group that has a forward arrow will also have a backward arrow in their group. After distributing these debuffs via Dive from Grace, Nidhogg will begin casting either Lash and Gnash or Gnash and Lash. These casts resolve a series of 3 steps. First, a shared damage AoE on a random player in front of Nidhogg that should be shared by 5 players, regardless of which cast. The next 2 steps are determined by the cast name. There are a lot of ways to remember which is which, but here's how I do it. The word Gnash is similar to Gnaw. Nidhogg is trying to bite you, so you should get out. Lash is similar to Leash. Nidhogg will choke you if you go too far, so you need to stay in. Translated, Lash and Gnash means stack, then in, then out, while Gnash and Lash means stack, then out, then in. At the same time that the Lash and Gnash cast finishes, the 5-player stack resolves at south, and the 3 1-marked players are dived upon. The stack is painful and requires some extra mitigation. The dives, on the other hand, are a bit more nuanced. We drop the first 3 dives on the west, north, and east edges of the boss's hitbox. The resulting towers will have to be soaked while the in-out part of Gnash and Lash is resolving, so this positioning is key. Dives are circle AoEs on the target players. Any other players struck by the dive will be sent on a trip to the wall, as it has a massive knockback. The players hit by the dives will all receive a fire resistance down. Because of this, soaking the towers they are dropping is lethal to these players, so we must have someone else handle soaking the towers. I'll go more into specifics of who soaks which tower later, but for now, just know that the 1s soak the 2-drop towers, the 2s soak the 3-dropped towers, and the 3s soak the 1-drop towers. After the stack and first dives resolve, the 3s will begin making their way to the towers dropped by the 1s, while the 1s will make their way back to the south group stack. While they are traveling, they must remember and position for the in-out portion of Lash and Gnash. Soaking a tower once again gives a fire resistance down, and after the 3s soak the towers dropped by the 1s, 3 Nidhogg clones will spawn, and begin casting Geirskogul on the nearest player. Geirskogul is a column AoE that will delete anyone it hits, or at least give them a disgusting damage down, resulting in them wishing they were dead. Each tower soaking player is responsible for baiting their Geirskogul directly outwards. Once you see the ad glowing pink, or see Geirskogul on its cast bar in the enmity list, you can sidestep to dodge the AoE. But for the west and east players, be sure to sidestep towards north, for reasons that will soon be clear. After baiting their Geirskogul, the 3s will just hang out where they soaked their tower, as this will be where they drop theirs later. While the first Geirskoguls are being baited, the second set of jumps on the 2-marked players will resolve. We have these players drop their jumps on the southwest and southeast markers, on either side of where we stacked for Lash and Gnash. As soon as these jumps go off, the 2s rejoin the south stack, while the 1s go to soak the resulting towers and bait the subsequent Geirskoguls. While the 1s are soaking their towers, Nidhogg begins another Gnash and Lash cast. Like earlier, this will be a 3-step cast, starting with a 5-player stack, before a combination of in and out AoEs. As soon as the 1s have baited their Geirskoguls, they rejoin the stack to share the damage. At the same time the stack resolves, the 3-marked players will be dived upon. While the in and out portion is resolving, the 2s must make their way to soak and bait the towers dropped by the 3s. As the final Geirskoguls are baited, Nidhogg will resume auto-attacking the main tank, but we still have some ground left to cover. How do we know who goes where for dropping and soaking? What about the arrows? And who soaks the 3rd tower dropped by the 3s if there are only 2 2-marked players? As soon as the Dive from Grace cast begins, my group does a pre-spread. We find the same number of players as ourselves and use this positioning to determine who is going where. The leftmost player resolves and soaks in the west position, the center player resolves and soaks in the north position, and the rightmost player resolves and soaks in the east position. Using this system, as soon as the markers come out, everyone immediately knows what position they are responsible for. There is, however, one caveat. At the end of the Dive from Grace cast, the arrows come out. The arrows will exist in a minimum of 1 and a maximum of 2 number groups, and as mentioned before, a forward arrow is always accompanied by a backward arrow. Regardless of our pre-spread positions, any group that receives arrows will override their pre-spread positions with a new system. The forward arrow always takes west, the backward arrow always takes east, and a circle player in a group that has arrows will always take north. Using this setup, our arrow players must always face east when they get dived on to drop their towers appropriately. The last loose end is the north 3 tower. The west and east 1s will be soaking the towers dropped by the west and east 2s, but there is no north 2. So that leaves the north 1 player to soak the north 3 tower. This mechanic is a lot to take in, and you're going to wipe to it, quite a lot. Be mindful that repetition is the father of learning, and exercise patience. This will likely be a make or break point for many hopeful Heavens legends, but anyone willing to put in the time and practice can master this mechanic. I've included a link in the pinned comment to a video of all potential POVs of this mechanic, and am happy to answer any questions that you may have. Following Dive from Grace, Nidhogg will auto-attack the main tank 2 times before facing a random party member and casting Drachenlance. Drachenlance is a small 90-degree Conal AoE. Simply don't be directly in front of him after he turns. Around this time, your raid buff should be coming up, and because the DPS check on this phase is particularly demanding, many groups choose to use potions here alongside them. After Drachenlance, 4 intercardinal towers will appear. These towers will each have between 1 and 4 pillars, and these pillars indicate how many players are needed to resolve them, and their combined total will always be 8. There are a few ways to approach this, but I strongly prefer the solution my group devised, both for uptime and comprehension. We assign each healer and range DPS to be an anchor at a tower. No matter what, these players will always report to these 4 towers. We chose the ranged specifically to be these anchors, as after these towers resolve, a Geirskogul must be baited. This allows us to have a ranged baiter at each tower, maximizing everyone's potential uptime. The melee, on the other hand, have a bit more responsibility. We assign the tanks L1 and L2, and the melee DPS R1 and R2. The L1 tank will start by looking at north and rotate their camera counterclockwise until they find a tower with a vacancy they can fill. L2 does the same thing, only they find the second vacancy available rotating counterclockwise. Similarly, melee R1 starts at north and rotates their camera clockwise to find a vacancy, while R2 rotates clockwise to find the second vacancy. It is important for the melee to start near middle, as you are afforded very little time to find which tower you belong in and move there. Rotate the camera, not your character. As mentioned before, after resolving the towers, 4 Nidhogg clones will appear. The melee should immediately move away to a cardinal on the boss's hitbox to avoid baiting the Geirskogul, while the range deal with the Geirskoguls. One of the 4 clones will not cast Geirskogul, and instead will have a tether spawn from it. Nidhogg will also have a tether spawn. These tethers are extremely high damage tank busters. If you do not have your invulnerability here, expect to use every cooldown in your kit, in addition to requiring some party mitigation and the biggest shields your healers can produce. In my group, the tanks just grab these tethers and pop their invulns. Another advantage of having invulnerability here is that the tanks can stack these busters to create more room for the rest of the raid, although that isn't necessary. Nidhogg will land 5 more auto attacks on the main tank before casting a Drachenlance that faces south every time. This is followed by Revenge of the Horde, Nidhogg's Enrage cast. Defeat him before this resolves to progress to the next phase. While progressing, it's fine to use a melee limit break here, but if your ultimate goal is to clear, you will need to manage to defeat him without it.